All right, so it's recording. You should all be able to see my screen now. And I'm going to make this full screen. This is a demo account that we have, and we're talking about activities today because, it'd be nice if every call, every prospecting call we made and every contact we had ended up with an appointment or a sale. But that doesn't happen, right? Oftentimes, these call outcomes end in some sort of follow-up status where someone's sitting on the fence or it's left with some action that needs to be completed by yourself or somebody on your team. And having the tools inside of Mojo is one thing to be able to follow up on this stuff, but knowing how to use them is another thing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And at the end of the call, we're going to talk about a little bit about follow-up bloat and one workflow idea to prevent that. And when I say follow-up bloat, I'll kind of touch on it throughout the webinar, but basically, a major mistake people make is they create too many of the wrong activities, the wrong types of activities for call outcomes that can be otherwise handled by grouping people into certain groups based on time frame. And again, we're going to focus more on that after the call. So the first thing we're going to get to today, again, my name is David England. I'm the VP over here at Mojo. Thank you for your time. It's 3 p.m. at least on the East Coast. We're up in New Hampshire. It's beautiful out. It's a little hot, but we'll get used to it since in about 12 weeks it'll be freezing. And I know your time's valuable, like I was starting to say, and I do appreciate you joining us. So the first thing to know about activities is you're introduced to them at the very beginning when you log into the Mojo platform. You'll see here on the home page we have today's activities overview. And what today's activities overview does is gives you a summary, gives you a summary of the activities you have due today. Those are the priority, right? So we put those right in your face as you log into the Mojo system. Now, there's a couple things you can do with this information. One, log it in your memory before you begin your prospecting calls to know that, hey, I'm not done when I'm done prospecting. I have to go back and kill all these activities. And two, it allows you to complete these right from the home page. You can double click on any of these line items and it will open and you can edit it or complete it and take action on it, review the contact information. You get the idea. So that's what the first, and that's the first introduction to the activities when you log into Mojo. Now we're going to go into the actual defined activities area. And that's at the top of the screen here. When I click on the activities button, I go to a whole separate area that's devoted to activities. And like I was saying earlier, a lot of you have been with Mojo for quite some time. We just revamped this for Mojo 2.0. And we did that because we know how important activities are. And by activities, I mean phone appointments, handshake appointments, follow-up calls, tasks. This is a lot of activity that gets generated when you're prospecting, especially if you're using a multi-line dialer and you're making contacts with people. So we wanted to re-engineer the page and kind of change the workflow so that these activities are at your fingertips. You don't have to drill down. And that's what we're looking at right here on the screen. And that's what I'm going to explain to you for this first part of the webinar. So again, we're at the activities area. In the top left area, you have two ways you can create activities, and this is the first way. You can do it right here from the actions menu on the activities page. So if I were to create a task, let's say, I can assign it to a contact. I can start to populate a name, and it will pull up all the contacts matching that name. And I can fill out the form, whether it's an appointment, task, or follow-up call, and it will save it to my activities planner. It'll set up my alerts, and the whole process takes over. But there's one other thing you can do here that's often overlooked. There are other parts of your business that maybe aren't related to a specific contact. Or, for instance, print mailers, print letters, get a haircut, whatever it might be. Now, as it sits today, you may have a platform that you already track that in, and that's great, good for you. I suggest you keep using it. But for those of you who are trying to leverage Mojo more as an all-in-one, my point is you don't have to put a contact name in here. You can create tasks for your life stuff and business stuff that isn't contact dependent and therefore shows up more as like a regular daily planner activity. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about. Again, is you can create actions or activities right from this actions pane, whether it's an appointment task or a follow-up call. The next place you can, and I'm going by an outline, and I apologize, but I just figured that I did something out of order. I'm going to quickly bounce into a contact form because this is important. And I'm going to pull up a bogus contact here and show you that the next place or the main area that you're probably going to set actions from is from the contact form. So we need to know how we set these up when we're actually on a call with somebody, and there's two options. The first one is the actions drop down. You can see here we have appointments, tasks, and follow-up call, and I can set an appointment, task, or follow-up call specific for this contact that I'm talking to by using this control. We've also included some quick controls. So orange, blue, and green, you'll notice here that they coincide with the color coding of appointment, task, and follow-up call. So instead of clicking on the actions drop-down to set an appointment, you can simply click on one of the quick buttons and it will speed up the process of setting those activities. So now that I've shown you that, let's get back out of this contact form and head back into the activities area. So what are the activities you can set inside of Mojo? Well, the first one is an appointment. And an appointment is a time-sensitive commitment. Whether it's, I'm going to meet you at your house at 2 on Saturday, or I'm going to call you at 2 on Saturday. So again, it's a time-sensitive follow-up, or a meeting, whether it's phone-based or face-to-face. It doesn't matter. The key point is it's time-based. And that's what an appointment is. And an appointment triggers activities and alerts and emails. It triggers activity, emails, and alerts so that you don't forget about that. And we're going to talk about that a little further on. The next activity type is a task. And you can see here I have a make pretend task. Get keys for 4501 Elm Street. And that may be something you use this for. Anything related to a contact that you need to do outside of calling them or mailing them, outside of calling them. It could include mailers. It could include, send this information to an assistant to do a CMA. Whatever pertains to that transaction, you can create a task for. Follow-up calls is the final activity that we have in the activities planner. And we're going to spend some time talking about follow-up calls today because a lot of people are confused by a follow-up call. And once you hear the explanation of a follow-up call, I believe you're going to find the power in it. So a lot of people ask us when they call in on the tech line, I want to set a follow-up call for a certain time. And they hear from us, well, that's a phone appointment. Right? So follow-up calls are a non-time-based follow-up call. And you can come up with the idea to set a follow-up call when you're talking to someone for a variety of reasons. So if you called me and I said, hey, call me Saturday, I'm home all day. You may go in with the close, great, does 10 a.m. work better or does 2 p.m. work better? And I'd come back at you and say, it doesn't matter, just call me all day, I'll be home. Call me anytime, I'll be home. That is one example of setting a follow-up call. The second example would be you're talking to somebody and you talk to them and you pitch them and you do your script and you get their sense of urgency. And they say something like, yeah, I need to sell my home, or I'm willing to list my home, or I need to be at this new job, or I need to be closer to my mother in 6 weeks. So you think, I'm going to call them in 4 weeks. And I'm going to give you a little tip here, folks. 90% of you using Mojo, or 90% of the people that use Mojo or any other prospecting system, they don't make that phone call in 4 weeks. They don't follow up. So that's your first tip. If you start to implement follow-up into your prospecting strategy, you're going to significantly see a lift in your listing appointments. That's guaranteed. We track what people do inside of Mojo, and few people, complete or have a working follow-up plan. They go for the low-hanging fruit, and that's great for the people who are willing to put a little effort in to get that lift out of it. So again, they tell me they need to be somewhere in 6 weeks. I go ahead and I set a follow-up call for 4 weeks. Mojo reminds me to make that call. It's not a time-based call. That's the takeaway I want you guys to have. So that is what the 3 different activity types are. Moving further on in this page, I'm going to breeze through this because it's the more of the nuts and bolts. You can set the time zone for how the information is displayed to you. So if you change your time zone, it'll update all the time-based stuff to that time zone. You can search based on a time frame, and the data for that time frame will populate in the grid. So you could say, I just, my wife and I, or my husband and I, or my partner and I, we want to go ahead and take a trip August 15th through the 22nd. Well, you can go through here and you can search everybody in that time frame and mass assign them to a different time frame, or just, for whatever reason you need that range filter, that's here. We also have preset ranges, and that is today, past, and future. You can combine them, or you can separate them, do them singularly, and you'll see the information that matches that time frame. You can choose to have more than 10 entries show up in your grid. So today I've only got 6, but if you'll see here, if I include my past, you'll see that it goes down to 16. And if I do my future, I still don't have more than 16. But if I had a lot of stuff scheduled, it would let you scroll down to 100 records. So that's what this show does. I'm going to simplify it here. Go back to 10. Okay, you can also search by name or phone number. And this is very convenient when somebody calls you back. Perhaps you had an appointment for Saturday at 2 to make a phone call to John Doe. John Doe calls you back and says, hey, you know what, I'm not going to be around, but let's talk right now. Well, you can go in and search John Doe after that incoming inbound phone call, and you can go ahead and remove that and clear that appointment from your planner by searching them here. You can print your activities for the day by using this print button. And over here on the left, and I skipped it and I apologize, if you're in a multi-agent environment, you're a manager or an owner level inside of Mojo, you can actually select which agents you want to view. And when you make that selection, either one or more agents, it will populate with their data inside of this grid. So you can take a peek at, who's setting these future activities and who's not. Lastly, we have our calendar, and our calendar gives you some color coding on it. It's just a quick view where you can look down at your days of the month and see a different colored icon based on what's scheduled. So you can see here on the 22nd, I've got blue, orange, and green. That makes sense because on my planner in front of me, I see blue, orange, and green. If your buddy calls you and says, hey, I got some Red Sox tickets, because that's only a baseball team worth seeing, of course, right? We're up here in New England. On the 30th, you can come in and say, you know what? That works great because I have nothing scheduled, or I have a follow-up call scheduled. No big deal. It wasn't time sensitive. I'll do it Monday. You get the idea. That's what this quick view is for. Now, while you're using Mojo, this is an upcoming feature I want to fill you in on right now. While you're using Mojo and you're cranking through your calls and you're updating contacts, you're setting appointments, you're clearing them, you're making tasks, you're clearing them, you're setting follow-up calls, you're clearing them. You get the idea. You're doing stuff inside of Mojo. One thing that keeps us engaged as salespeople, that's my background, it's all I've ever done, is seeing that we're pushing the ball forward, that we're making a headway, I guess you could say. So the one thing we're coming out with before I move on to more activity stuff is we will be releasing what's called a new activity stream to the Mojo homepage soon. And this activity stream is going to be a stream of all the activities you're doing inside of Mojo. And it's going to capture a bunch of different points of reference as you move throughout Mojo that are important to salespeople to know. Like I was saying, set a note, set an appointment, created a note, cleared an appointment, that kind of stuff. It's all going to show up on the home page, and it can be agent based. So if you have ISAs, or there's a couple of you on the account, you can go in and say, hey, Joe, you're generating a quarter of the activity of the other 2 people on the account. Let's talk about how you're prospecting. What are you doing right? What are you doing wrong? Maybe you don't know how Mojo works. And it just gives you, ultimately, more importantly, it gives you feedback each day when you log into Mojo or you log out of Mojo. You come back to the home page and you can say, wow, I killed it today. I did what I needed to do. I took action on a bunch of stuff, and this is going to equate to more listings. All right, so I'm going to go back to the activities area here. And we're going to go back and talk about how to set appointments, set up follow-up calls, how to complete them, and I'm going to kind of go through an order here. So I'm actually going to go back to the data dialer, and again, I'm going to pull up one of those records. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about setting an appointment, and we're not going to talk about that one because I've already got a test one in there. We're going to go ahead to this guy here. So if I was on the phone with Mojo Contact here, I would go ahead and probably once you get comfortable with the system in the workflow, I would use this quick button. And once you click on that, it actually pulls up your calendar and it gives you this month and the next month. You can go back by using this control or forward by using this control. Once you do that and you land on the day, because that's obviously very important, you can use these drop downs to set the time. You can also choose now. We do have a request for that every once in a while, especially if you have an ISA who's setting an appointment for you. Sure, they can't act on it right now, but I'll show you what they can do here in a minute to send it to you to get that appointment right now, such as a phone call. But once you've selected your date and time, you just click done. You can set the duration. It shows you the time and the day. You can give it a title, which is important because we display the title throughout Mojo in the different areas where we have the appointment logged. You can give it a description, especially if someone's passing it off to you or you're passing it off to them. And this could be like, talk to, Mrs. Jones. She's really excited. Heard Mr. Jones in the background, wants to talk to every other realtor, and then he's going to try to list it himself. Those are all good notes to put inside the description so that whoever's following up with it, or perhaps it's you 3 weeks from now, you remember what was going on in that call. Here's where you can assign it to somebody. So I could assign this to somebody else on the account. And again, if you're in a situation where it's a multi-user environment, you have people who are making calls for you, this is a slick feature. And then you can set the priority of it. And then you just simply click save. All activities, whether it's a follow-up call, a task, anything you need to do with a contact that you've created is going to show up in the activities area. And this is the format. It shows you what type of activity. In this case, it was an appointment. When it's due, the time it's due, and who set it. And it shows you the title. Remember I told you that was important? It'll show you the title of that, and it also gives it a priority. So that's going to be true for any of the activities you set up. They'll all be here inside of this activities area. The other thing that's true is that each one of these entries, whether it's an appointment, a follow-up call, or a task, is going to have a checkbox to complete it, an edit button to edit it, and a delete button to delete it in case there was an error made. Once you do complete it, and I'm going to demonstrate one of the ways to clear it, is once you do clear it, you simply click the green button, the checkbox, You can give it a note. And then just hit complete. And now when the screen refreshes, there's no longer an activity there. Well, where did it go? If you go over to the history area, you'll now see that it logs that you completed that appointment. So that's how you complete either an appointment, a follow-up call, or a task from the contact form. Tasks are very similar. I'm going to stay on this contact form to keep it simple. Tasks are very similar. You give it a subject. You give it the details. You assign it. It defaults to the person who's logged in. So in that case, it's the owner of Mojo, who happens to be the manager on this account that I logged in with. And then you can set it out for how many days you want it to go out. Here's a little trick, folks. We get this all the time. It's obviously we didn't design it very well, so there'll be some changes coming. If I click inside of that area, it pops a calendar so I can go out much easier, much quicker if I have to go out, a month or two to set a task. You just simply click on that date area there. And then we have our priority, low, medium to high. You'll see another checkbox here. And this is a new feature. It's called Set for Recurring. And here's how this works today. If I were to set up a follow-up, or let's say I want to set a task to touch this person every 30 days with a postcard. There's a couple ways you could do that. I'm just throwing out an example. You could set a global task in the database, not assigned to any contact, with the subject send postcards. Or you could, in this case, set up for recurring. Now, I could go out 30 days, So the 25th is, today's the 22nd. I go to August 22nd and have it set for recurring. Now, every month, it's going to remind me to send this person a postcard. That's what set for recurring does. It takes the difference between the date you set it, today's date, and the date you set it for, the schedule date, and then it uses the difference in days there, in this case it's a month, and sets it to recur by that amount of days. Now, soon here in the future, you're actually going to be able to set the first one for whenever, and then set your recurring time frame. But for today, this is how it works. You simply click save, refresh the screen, and here it is. You have your task, who it's assigned to, priority. In this case, we have the title, and then we have the description. You can clear it, you can edit it, or you can delete it. But you'll notice there's something different about this entry. You'll notice that in this case, unlike the appointment, there's a red button here with a line through it. And what this does is this stops the recurring cycle. So if I click it, are you sure you want to stop this event from occurring? It's written wrong. Brandon, make a note of that. And I click stop. It clears it and it stops it from recurring. So it takes it off my plate 30 days from now and then 30 days after that. Hope you guys understand that. Last one we're going to talk about as far as setting it up from the contact form, your activity, is going to be follow-up calls. So again, a follow-up call is a non-time-based call. So I can click on the follow-up call control, and I want to call them in 5 days. Simple. I click the plus button 5 days from now, or I click inside the date area and choose a date from the calendar. A manager and a priority. This is important. Mark this down in your mental notes. If you're going to utilize follow-up calls, which I think you're crazy if you don't, you're going to want to pay attention to the priority. We're a dialer. We allow you to do automated follow-up call dialing. One of the things we give you as a filter, we're going to show this to you here in a bit, is the ability to dial based off of priority. And this almost leads into that follow-up blow, but I'm going to save it for the end. Here's what will happen. You will eventually, if you leave everything to default to medium, and let's say someone says, call me in the fall. Well, I don't know what it means to you guys all over the country, but for us up here in New Hampshire, fall time is when all the fairs start. If anybody's from New England, you know what I'm talking about. September 1st rolls around, all the fairs open up, and it's pumpkins and corn stalks and the smell of apple cider, right? So if someone were to say to me on a sales call me in the fall, I'm probably going to put it out until September 1st. Oh, going to get my eyes checked. September 1st. And I'm going to click save. 5 calls from now, I get 5 contacts from now, in the same prospecting session, someone says, call me in the fall. Well, what do I default it to? September 1st. Well, eventually, when September 1st comes, when you look at your planner, you've got 200 follow-up calls. Now, do all those 200 follow-up calls share the same weight or the sense of urgency? Of course not. So you need to decide from the feedback you're getting from your contact, what is the priority of that follow-up call? Is it high, meaning I have to make it? Is it medium, meaning I better make it? Or is it low, meaning it's a shot in the dark, they're on the fence. There's all kinds of reasons why I think this may not go my way. It's not really urgent. So again, in that situation where you have 200, and we're going to talk about how to avoid that from a fundamental standpoint here at the end of the call. But if you do it this way, inside of the Mojo follow-up call wizard, you can dial based on the highest priority down to medium, down to low. So that at least if you only got 15 minutes or 25 minutes penciled on your calendar, you can at least get to the high priority ones first. I hope that makes sense. I can also set a follow-up call to be recurring. So that's a great feature. In fact, it's one way to really focus on doing follow-up. So if I wanted to call this person, let's say today's the 22nd, right? If I wanted to call them on the 26th, that's 4 days from now, it will recur every 4 days from that point forward until I tell it to stop. So it's going to constantly loop every 4 days. They're going to put that contact in front of me. And that's the kind of activity that you set up inside of Mojo when you're prospecting that generates a ton of results. See, prospecting with a triple line dialer is like the tip of the spear when it comes to your pipeline. You're generating leads. You're not looking, in my opinion, anyways, and this is a thought held by many of our top producers that do 100 plus transactions a year with Mojo. You're not just looking for that low hanging fruit that's ready to meet today or within the next week. You're actually, instead of paying all these companies this money, right, to generate leads from me off of Craigslist, Zillow, all these companies that supposedly send me these great web leads. Well, you can use Mojo not just as the tip of the spear. You can use it in this fashion to generate your own warm leads by cultivating them off of that first contact. And this is a great way to do it, which is setting up recurring follow-up calls. Okay, hope that makes sense. If you have any questions about that. Oop, hold on one second. All right, I just got a correction made to me. Whew. Thank you, Brandon. Everybody give Brandon a hand of applause. Here's the deal with follow-up calls. If I set a date on the calendar, let's say the 26th, it's going to recur every 26th of the month if I set it for recurring. It's not going to count out the days. In order to have it count every 3 days, let's go back to today's date, and every 3 days is just an example, I would have to hit the control 3 times, and then it will do it every 3 days. Hope that makes sense. Very sorry about that. Just like with tasks, we are going to set this up where you can have one follow-up call scheduled, and then you can recur off of that in a different increment. So I could say, I'm going to call this person, my first follow-up call is going to be August 1st, and then from August 1st, I'm going to follow up with them every day, every 3 days. Hope that makes sense. All right, perfect. So once you start utilizing the follow-up call activity, and again, I'm focusing on this because there's a lot of proof in the pudding that this is how you can really blow up your listing inventory and generate a lot of leads that other people prospecting, certainly just getting started in prospecting, aren't leveraging. So what I want to show you is in the reports area, we have a recurring event report. And well, hold on one second. Unfortunately, in order for me to have this make sense, I got to set one up. Very sorry. I didn't save that right. Okay. And I'm wondering, I go back to my reports, recurring events. Okay. So you've been using Mojo the way I've just implied. You're starting fresh with Mojo on Monday. You're going to start utilizing the follow-up calls. Well, how do you know who you have follow-up calls set up with? You can see them at the individual level, right? Inside the activities area on each contact. But you also need a broader, you need to cast a bigger net sometimes to see who you have recurring events set up for. And this is what the recurring events report is all about. It shows you what type. In this case, it's a follow-up call. I can stop it for this person. I can edit it. And most of all, I can see where the start date is and how long it repeats, or excuse me, the frequency of which it repeats. In this case, it's every 2 days. I can sort these columns and whatnot, but this is a great place for you to go in. If you're unsure of what your follow-up calls look like, perhaps you have something due on a day, you can go in where you're going to be out of the office and not make that call. You can go in here as well and reschedule that. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Again, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and fire those off to Brandon. All right, one last thing I'm going to talk about on my outline here. One of the points of automation that we have inside of Mojo when you're making a follow-up call. This is really important if you have ISAs in your account or you have a multi-user account and you're responsible for overseeing their activity. One of the bugs we used to have in Mojo was if somebody made a follow-up call using the dialer, again, I'm going to get to that in a minute, and they got the person on the phone and they actually rescheduled the follow-up call, it would delete that today call and it would just reschedule it, is how most of that bug worked. Today, here's how it works. When you're making follow-up calls with Mojo and you reschedule it, it's going to mark that call today as completed. And then it's going to create a new follow-up call. So why does all that matter? I hope I didn't just confuse you. Again, if you've got an agent calling on your behalf and they're like, and you say to them, hey, you have 30 follow-up calls in your planner, but you go in and it looks like, they didn't do much today. There's no activity for this contact. Well, that's a problem, right? You're going to come down on them pretty hard or come down on yourself pretty hard. Now with the new method, it's going to say, okay, they did make that follow-up call today like they were supposed to, and they rescheduled it for this day. So I just wanted to point that out, just so you know that we do trap that activity. All right, let me change my outline here a little bit. So again, I hope you guys are following along. We're going to get to some more best practices here in a minute, which hopefully it'll tie in everything I'm kind of showing you now. All right. So we've gone over how to create these different activities. We can do it from the activities area here, or we can drill down while we're on the phone with an individual contact and use one of our quick links here, or use the contact dropdown. All right, so we've defined that. Now let's proceed with the follow-up calls and how they work with the dialer. So I'm going to go back to my activities area, and this is slick. And I don't want to look at all my activities for today because I'm about to make my follow-up call. So I'm just going to highlight the follow-up calls. You'll notice it highlights green, and that's all I'm left with. And you'll also see here, and this is important because a lot of people miss this, there's a phone icon. And in order to start the follow-up call dialing, I need to click on this phone icon. So before we get into how this is going to work, I want to point something out that comes up a lot. A lot of people ask us, why don't you let us triple line dial our follow-up calls? Well, the priority of a follow-up call is such that you purposely schedule the follow-up call for a certain day. I know it's not time-based, but you know you've got them on the phone before. It's not a prospecting situation where you don't know if the number works, if they never pick their phone up, so you want to just dial. We only allow the single line dial because this is a very targeted calling style. And I'm going to tell you what also we do to make it targeted. You may or may not know this right now, but when you're prospecting with Mojo and you assign the contact last result, for a lot of you, you have lead providers that give you multiple phone numbers for a record. And again, you probably missed this because you haven't been paying attention to it. When you mark a number as contact, it actually looks at the phone number you're connected to them on, so their home line, let's just say, and it moves it to the priority of the first phone number. So that's great news if you're single line dialing your follow-up calls, because it'll call them with one line on the number you've had them before, that you've contacted them on before. So it's not like you've got to call through 6 of their bad phone numbers to get them on their 7th, right? It's always going to put that first number up on top of the phone one field when you're prospecting Mojo, with Mojo, and you stick them into the contact last result, or you apply the contact last result. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so moving on, let's take a look at this call wizard, because naturally it looks different than the one that pops up in the triple line dialer. So again, we talked about setting the priority correctly. So in this case, I can choose to dial contacts from high to low priority. If I've got 200, which we're going to talk about how to avoid that here in a minute, if I've got 200 for the day, or I've missed 200, there's 200 in the past, I may just want to focus on the ones that are the highest priority. We've got not dialed in the last 24 hours. That can come in handy if you're not getting people on the phone and you haven't manually cleared them out of your planner by clicking on that green checkbox to clear the follow-up call. They're gonna stay on your follow-up call planner. So you may want to just target people you haven't contacted in the last 24 hours. Okay. That brings us to point number 10 about follow-up calls. This is an important one. We have one method that's automated for marking a follow-up call as completed. And when you're using the follow-up call dialer like I'm about to do, if you choose the contact last result, it automates the clearing of that follow-up call. So in the background, when you click contact, it says, they reached them on the phone, mark it as completed, and take it off of the planner so we don't leave it on them we don't leave it on it for them to dial in the future. Now, that also brings up a good point. Pay attention to the last call results you're using. Because if you were to have chosen no contact, any other result other than contact, it would have stayed on there. So you don't want to accidentally mark someone as contact because they're going to come off your planner, and then you'll either never have another follow-up call with them again, or it's only going to remind you when that recurring follow-up call comes up again. So that's a nice little feature we built into Mojo. If you're doing follow-up call dialing and press contact, it automates the clearing of that follow-up call for you. In the advanced settings, we have the lead sheet, just like we do in the triple line dialer. The lead sheet tab is set as default. We've got that option, the calling script, and then we have the call me mode, and I don't need to go through the rest of it, hopefully for you. I will tell you this, a lot of people choose not to have the call hammer on. And the reason for that is, again, we move that priority number, the one you talk to them on, to the top of that record. So that's probably the number you're going to get them on. That's your best chance phone number, right? So if I initiate a call hammer and those other 6 phone numbers are still on the record, it's going to slow the process down, and you're going to start calling numbers you may have never reached them on before, and that will slow down the follow-up call dialer. So just so you guys understand, call hammer on, it's going to call all the phone numbers. And in this case, for prospecting somebody, a brand new lead you haven't qualified yet, call hammer makes total sense, or we wouldn't have it in Mojo. But in this scenario, you may want to reevaluate whether you use call hammer here or not, because again, the dialer is going to automatically call the number you last spoke to them on anyways. All right, so I've made my choices here. I just hit start dialing, and it shows me my 3 phone calls I have to make today. You'll notice here, 1 contact is filtered out. There was 4 on my planner, right? But one of them didn't have a phone number, so I can't call it. So there's 3 here. I just simply click the start calling, and it walks me through logging in the dialer. I am going to do that right now, simply because there may be some new users on the call who have never logged in the dialer, and they may want to see it. So I'm just going to log in by dialing 766-8935, as it shows here on the screen. It's instructing me to do that, and then using your touchtone phone, I'm going to enter my PIN. You are now logged into the Mojo dialer. I'm now logged in. I'm going to shut that speakerphone off because it's annoying me. Very sorry. Now I just have to press the start call button, the start button. And remember, it's going to be a single line dialer. So even if you have a triple line dialer license with us, we're going to focus dial, right? Because these are follow-up calls, and we're going to do it with a single line. Now I went to busy because they're VoIP phone numbers that we have that we call, and for this test dialing, we have them programmed in to ring busy. So if I got on the phone with one of these people and I press the contact button, what's going to happen? It's going to automatically clear that. We'll see here, they're still on my planner. Why is that? Because I never got them on the phone. So we don't want to automatically yank them just because you made an attempt, right? You're not going to get anywhere with this follow-up workflow if that's how we did it. So we leave them on here until you contact them. And again, you can clear them from the record while you're calling them, or you can go back in after your dialing session and just hit the green checkbox and clear them that way. There's a question before I move on that comes up all the time. And that is, well, I find myself calling people I've either set appointments with or follow-up calls while I'm prospecting, and it's embarrassing. Well, that's a question. There's a lot of problems with that question. Not that it's a bad question, but it's an indicator to us at Mojo. And I don't have an employee here who hasn't been here for at least 5 years. And that just screams, I don't know how to use Mojo, and you need some time spent on the phone with one of our folks. So if that happens to you, pay attention. There's a few things wrong with that. The first one is, If you're doing, if you're prospecting with Mojo in your properties calling list or your regular calling list, and you're calling people you've set appointments with or you've scheduled follow-up calls for, you're not using the workflow like you should. And what that workflow is, these two boxes, properties calling lists, which if you're a real estate agent, that's where all your new off-market data will go into if it auto posts. And then we have our calling list, whether which is used by everybody that imports files or has data posting like Cold Directory or the Mojo Lead Store. That'll come into here. Either, regardless of where the leads are coming from, the assumption is, based on our logic in Mojo, is these are new leads you've never called before. So you don't want to accidentally leave somebody that you qualified in one of these lists. You're going to want to group them into the appropriate group. And the way you do that is you simply, when you're on the phone with a person and you contact them, you simply apply the correct group to that lead. And it could be future follow-up if you're going to set a follow-up call. That's a great one to use. Then you just log into Mojo, click on your future follow-up group, and then everyone you have a follow-up call scheduled for resides there, right? So that's one question that comes up. There are the occasions, and I don't understand them totally, but I don't need to. We just have to have an answer for it. There are occasions where people purposely leave those leads inside of their Mojo accounts, inside of their, property calling lists and calling lists. So we have a way to avoid calling them even though you left them in the list. And let's take a look at that. If you look down here, we have an option for filter out contacts who have a future call or appointment scheduled. If you check that box, it won't load them into the dialer. It'll call everybody else based on your settings, but it won't call anybody that has a future call or appointment scheduled. So we put that safeguard in there. One case where you may run into that, that's logical, is, I don't know, let's say you have a hot lead bin. And your hot leads are just anybody that, let's say you call buyer leads. And a hot lead is anybody that was a buyer lead that you got on the phone that has a want, need, desire, time frame, sense of urgency. And only sometimes do you set appointments with those people. Well, the hot lead group, it makes sense that all your hot leads would be there, and some of your hot leads are going to have appointments. So that is one case. If you power dial through your hot leads, that's certainly a great time to use your filter out contacts who have a future call or appointment scheduled. I just wanted to add that little blip in there so that we didn't miss it. All right, let me look at my outline here. So the fact that we have the tools and the fact that you're learning how to use them is great, but you guys are salespeople, and it's funny. I bet you if we did an analysis for our customer base that use Mojo, most of them are type A. They're very driven. They have a lot of stuff on their plate. They're very active in their communities. And listen, you don't always remember that you have a call to make at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, right? And of course, you may use Google. You may have an Android phone. You may use iCal or Outlook. That's all great. If that's working for you and you can accomplish the root task of following up with people and moving your database along, then fantastic. But with Mojo, we have a few emails and alerts that I want to talk to you guys about. The first one is the daily activities email. And the daily activities email will go out to, I think it's 6 a.m. Every day if you activate it in the, Brandon, I think it's a settings area, correct? I think if I go right here under notifications, it'll say, and there's a checkbox for enable calendar notifications and check this box to receive a daily email from Mojo with all of your scheduled activities for the day. This is agent based. So if you had 10 agents on your Mojo account and they had 10 unique email addresses, that's okay. Their email address is going to populate here based on their agent. So you can change this if you wanted to for some reason. Maybe you want it to go to one main email account. But in a nutshell, what will happen is each day at 6 a.m., if this box is checked, it's going to send out an email that says, here are your calls for today. Follow-ups, follow-up calls, here are your appointments for today, and here are your tasks for the day. Get them done. So that's the first thing we do with our activities email. The second thing you can do, or the second thing you can do here on the screen, is you can choose to enable calendar notifications, and that's going to send you, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, because I didn't go over this with you before the call, but basically that's what's going to alert you when you have an appointment due. And here's the time frame that it works. it will email you an hour before the event. Okay. So if you have an appointment at 2, it'll email you around 1 p.m. and let you know that you have an upcoming appointment. If you've set the appointment within the hour, so you called somebody at 2:15 and you set a phone appointment for 3, that's within the hour, it's going to send it to you in real time when it's due. Now, that covers the emails. We also alert you via the interface here in Mojo. So if I would have set, let me do it real quick. Today's the 22nd. What time is it? It is 3. Oh, I could look up here on the new clock in Mojo. What was I thinking? Da, 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 da. 3. It's to the 15. Okay, so when you have an appointment that comes up that is due, it is going to alert you here at the top left of your screen, and you can decide to clear it, take action on it, or snooze it. And what that'll be very powerful for you if you're just in Mojo playing around. It'll pop up and you're like, oh, shoot, I got to get that appointment done. You click on it, it takes you to the contact record. Here's a word of caution. If you're in a dialing session and that pop-up comes up, make sure you stop your dialing session before you say go to event, because it's going to take you to that event and you may miss the pickup. Oop, that's my trusty little 8-minute timeout. So if you are in a dialing session and that pops up, make sure you stop your call session, pause your line, stop it, and then click on the go to event so that you don't miss a live answer when whoever you're prospecting to, not related to that appointment, picks up the phone. Again, I hope that makes sense for you guys. If not, post a question to Brandon inside of the questions pane. All right, so we've covered what they are. We've given you the overview, where to find them, how to complete them, how to create them. Now we're going to lead into the use cases, or I guess some best business practices, some overview stuff here. But before I do, that's funny, I just got it on my phone. If you have Mojo ID, there's another alert. Mojo on the Go. That's our iPhone or our Android application that is built for Mojo. It's the power dialer on your handheld device or your iPad, coming soon for the Android tablets. If you've got one of those apps installed in your device, it will also alert you when you're on the go. So that's another safeguard we put in. So if you don't get the email, you'll get the alert notification on your phone. And if you don't use Mojo on the Go for prospecting, at least use it for that functionality. All right, so why do we create follow-up calls when we're using Mojo? It's because people, like I said at the beginning of this call, very few people are like, let's go right now. They're on the fence. And too many agents stop there and they ditch it. I call it pitch and ditch. They pitch them, they ditch them. That's a shame because those people are going to list. Oh, there we go. I'm going to dismiss it. Because those people are going to list their home eventually, right? It depends on, the only variable is who are they going to list it with. And I would argue this is also true for sale by owners. If you get someone on the phone, and you guys are all schooled in this, you're way more educated than I am in this, but if you get somebody on the phone that's a FSBO and they're like, oh, you're dumb, I'm an engineer, I could sell my house, just remember that person's going to be on their knees at some point begging for someone to sell their house. And again, put them in a follow-up call routine. That helps. So those are reasons to set up follow-up calls for people that are on the fence. You're going to be more successful. There's no question about it. The other thing I want to point out is making time for your follow-up activities. We're leading into follow-up bloat now. A lot of people, they have great intentions. That's why you have Mojo. You have great intentions, right? That's why you have all the different tools that you have. You wouldn't believe how many things I've signed up for and I never use them, right? Well, here's what happens. They set up a bunch of follow-up calls, tasks, appointments, and they never get to them because they didn't think. I have the power hour that I prospect each day from 8 to 9 or maybe 7:30 to 8:30. After that, my schedule's full. I'm listing homes, I'm doing paperwork, I'm closing, I'm over to the title office, whatever it is that you do during your day. I know you're all very busy. Well, if you only have an hour to prospect and you use that whole time prospecting, you're not going to get to your follow-up calls, your appointments, and your tasks potentially. Certainly you won't get your follow-up calls. So that's a tip. Schedule in, pencil in some time to take care of your follow-up activities to ensure that you're going to get those done. So let's get to the grand finale here. We talked about this fundamental way of thinking, I guess, the workflow inside of Mojo, the lead workflow, in a past webinar, and we got inundated, flooded with emails like, oh my God, tell me more about that, tell me more about that. So that's why we came up with this flash webinar to kind of talk about how to use activities, what the different ones mean, and then draw a contrast to how else you can use Mojo to perform other types of follow-up. And let's go back to my data and dialer, not to confuse everybody here. So here's how not to use follow-up calls. Follow-up calls should not be, in our opinion, and in the opinion of many people who are very successful using Mojo, a way for you to perform long-term follow-up. What's long-term follow-up? Remember that example I gave you with someone says, call me back in the fall, and I said I would set a follow-up call for September 1st? Well, that sense of urgency probably isn't there. But I'm new to Mojo, or I haven't really played with Mojo enough. It only makes sense that I'd set a follow-up call for September 1st. And that does make sense face value. But here's where it doesn't make sense. Again, back to my example of I said everybody that says call me in the fall for September 1st, right? And it comes September 1st, I've got 200-300 people I have to call. Well, if you're putting them out that far, the priority's probably not that high. So I would suggest you do this. I would go into your Mojo account and I would start to make, this is just one example, and follow up with us. I would start to make, follow up with my staff about how else to do this if you need more clarity on this. I would make an O1 list, group, excuse me, not a list, don't make that mistake. I'd make an O2, and I'm not going to go through the whole calendar here to really bore you. I'd make an O3, and I would make groups for each month of the year. So whether I'm calling a for sale by owner, an off-market lead, a just listed your sold circle prospect, doesn't matter. If I'm calling these folks, if I'm taking the time to call them, if I'm going through, if I'm getting past my call reluctance and I'm being a trooper and I'm calling them and I'm getting them on the phone and they haven't told me to get lost, follow-up calls not always the right thing. And here's an example. These are what I would use to indicate months, January, February, March. Rather than set a single follow-up call, what I would have you do, and again, a lot of people agree with this, is group those folks into the month where you might call them. Here's an example. Hey, Mr. Jones, blah, 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 blah. And they say to me, I'm not doing anything till the summer. Call me back then. Well, they're probably saying that to everyone who's calling them. You want to be the one that actually calls them back then. So if you had your groups 01 through 12 to indicate all the months of the year, you'd have a 06 group. And by the way, we put the zeros in front of them so they're always in numerical order, so it's easy to look at. You put them in the 6 group. And now you may get 200 people in the 6 group. What do you do with that? Well, they weren't a high priority call. They didn't say, call me at this time exactly or on this day exactly. They just said, call you in the summer. What you do is, after you get done your normal new lead, unqualified prospecting and your expired FSBOs, withdrawals, cancels, you load up your 6 group. These are all people you've already spoken to and you've qualified them, and you power dial through those. And what happens on that call determines what you do with it next. You call them in June because they're in the June group or the 6th group, excuse me, and they tell you, hey, there's been a setback on my job. They didn't break ground. I'm looking at the fall. What are you going to do with that lead? You're not going to fret it. You're not going to sweat it. It's not going to fall through the cracks. You're going to remove them from the June group and stick them in the September group and forget about them until September. And, so a question always comes up from people, well, if they don't tell me when to call them back, what group do I put them into? Look, you're all salespeople. You have an instinct in you. You have a gut. You're all probably pretty good at it. If someone gives you, 5 bits of information about their lifestyle or about their current situation, you may formulate an opinion of when you need to call them back, and you just throw them into that group. Now, at the end of the month, if I'm in well, we're going to use March as an example. If I'm in March and there's 100 people, and throughout the month of March, I've been hitting this list, right? Maybe every 3 or 4 days, whatever it is. At the end of March, out of the original 100, there's still 25 left that I haven't spoken to. Well, they're going to stay in that group, right? Because we haven't moved them out because we haven't qualified them again to decide what to do with them. Well, what we recommend that you do is you would highlight the group so that the data populates at the bottom here, select all, assign to group. Now, what group am I going to put them into? I'm going to put them into April. Why? Because that's the next logical step. It's a month later. I'm going to try to get them on the phone. And what happens is if that's the method you use, whereas at the end of the month, if anybody is left in a group that's expiring, let's say, again, the end of March, then I'm going to move them all into April. So now those leads mingle in with or intermingle into my April group. And now I've got 400 or 500 people I can prospect. And the point here, folks, is these are people you've got on the phone before and you've qualified them. You just didn't nail them down for an appointment and you didn't set a specific follow-up call for them. So these are high value leads. All of a sudden after 6 months of doing this, even a quarter of doing this, those Zillow leads don't seem so enticing. And a lot of people will say, well, what happens if I've called somebody over and over and over again? They're just not picking the phone up. They've got 20 attempts. There's a couple things you can do. You could leave them in the group, keep moving them forward, and you could do something like use the filter stop call attempts at 12. You may say, I don't want to call anybody after 12 attempts. I'm not going to get them on the phone. You could do that. There's some issues with that, but you could do that. What I would suggest is doing this. And there's a customer by the name of Jason Morris. And this guy is remarkable. He's wicked analytical, really hard on us, keeps us on our toes to keep developing and perfecting and making things better. He went from something like 20 or 30 transactions a year to over 100. And this is how we did it. So I asked him, well, what do you do with the people that just don't pick the phone up, Jason? He's like, it's simple. I create an archive group. So anyone that's not picking the phone up, then I'm just like, yeah, I've tried this person over and over again. He puts them in the archive group, but there's still value there, right? Because he's got them on the phone before and they had a want, a need, or a desire. Maybe not a crazy sense of urgency, but they're going to list their home. They have to. Well, he loads this archive list up, I believe he said every quarter. And he dials it. And if he gets somebody on the phone, what's the next step? Qualify them back into a month group. So it's a perpetual, is that the right word for it? You're constantly massaging your database and gold nuggets begin to fall out of it. So that is what I would suggest to do for those follow-up calls that need to happen, but you want to avoid follow-up bloat, which, by the way, I'm a bad presenter. Follow-up bloat is that thing where it happens to everybody, especially if you're a Salesforce user. Those guys are crazy with all the stuff they do. You wake up one day, you log into your CRM, your lead manager, and you have 500 phone calls you have to make. And again, you don't know what the priority of them are. You don't know what the priority is of those phone calls. And you just get discouraged and you say, the hell with CRM, pardon my French. Or the heck with doing any follow-up. I'm not getting it done anyways. There's a way, there's a method to get it done, and you will reap the rewards of doing it. And again, this is one method. So the question is, when do I use the follow-up call? And Mojo, you stuck a follow-up call planner in here. When do you want me to set these? When am I not going to use that group method? And here's my suggestion, and this is what Jason does. And I don't have it verbatim because it was a while ago that I talked to him, probably 6 weeks ago. And where he and I are going to do a call where we invite people to it. But in a nutshell, if someone says call me in the next few days, but they don't give you a time frame, or they say call me next week sometime, or even, hey, call me in 2 weeks, I'll be back from my trip to Orlando. That's a great opportunity for a follow-up call. They didn't say call me Tuesday at 2 because I would expect you to set a phone appointment, right? They said call me, it's within like a 14-day time period. Then you set up your follow-up call. And you make your follow-up call when it comes due. Or a scenario where you have a buyer lead, they're hot. You want to keep in touch with them. Yeah, you got them trigger email and all that stuff, which you'll be able to do through Mojo soon. and you're touching them that way. But we all know, at least I hope you know, that the phone or face to face is probably the best form of contact to push a lead along. You may want to take that person and set a recurring follow up call for them. You may stick them into a group called Future Follow Up, and you put them in a perpetual, a scheduled follow up call cycle. That's a good use case for follow up calls, especially for those leads you want to touch every few days, because you've got to keep yourself branded. If you think you're the only person that they filled a form out for, or if you think your website's the only one they filled a form out on, you get the idea. That's not the case. They went a lot of different places, and well, that's your business. You guys understand that. So it's best that you outshine the other agents by following up with people. All the other ones, if it's not a set time, stick them into a month group and hammer it with a power dialer. You will see a big uptick. Now, another thing he does, and I don't see it on here, let's say you call one of these people in your monthly groups and they say to you, they have that magic brother-in-law, best agent on the planet, and they're going to list with him. He will stick them into the competitor group. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, if it's an off-market property, listing status is extremely sensitive. But basically, he sticks it into a competitor group. And one thing you could do is make a sub list off of it for just expired, withdrawn, and canceled. And we do that by just clicking on the sub list maker and applying those filters, which we did in another flash webinar. But in a nutshell, you can categorize out or sub list those out and only follow up with those ones, maybe once every 6 months, to make sure, hey, you're still in expired status. You obviously didn't list with your magic brother-in-law. What's going on? But he likes to do that. He'll put them in archive to indicate that they're still in the market. I just can't get them on the, or he thinks they're still on the market. He just can't get them on the phone. Then he has a competitor group because he got some indication from them that they have a brother-in-law, a friend, another realtor doing their job as good as you, who they're going to list their home with. And he wants to keep an eye on them because we know how those things can get squirrely. All right, Brandon, did I miss anything? I'm sure there's a lot of stuff. I got a lot on my mind today, but I hope I didn't.
We went over quite a bit of content, so I think you actually covered quite a bit. I think you did really well.
All right, what I'm going to do now, Brandon, if you think I didn't do anything, I'm going to go ahead and start looking at some questions that Brandon might not have gotten to, which would be shocking because he's really good. Hold on just a minute here while I take care of this. All right, I'm going to bounce over to here. Holy smokes. A lot of questions. That's excellent. All right, so I'm going to go through the questions, and if it's one that Brandon's already answered, I may bring it up because I'm like, hey, that's a good little question to have answered for everybody. So I just read a question. I want to talk about what the future of Mojo is. So I lead, and Brandon has a lot to do with this too, the direction of the development and the design. As probably, or hopefully you know, there's a marketing area inside of Mojo. And right now there's letters, envelopes, and mailing labels, right? We're about to launch drip email. Our goal is to make sure it gets to every inbox. With all the spam laws and the filters, we're coming up with algorithms to make sure that it has the best success of making it to an inbox. Once that's done, that's the design, that's where we're at right now. The functionality is completed. We're going to release that. Once drip email is out of beta, we're going to release action plans. And it's funny, a lot of people ask about this, and we had it 5 years ago in an old platform. We just didn't execute it very well. So we are coming up with action plans, which will further improve your ability to follow up with Mojo. Because remember, everyone's going to list their home or buy a home at some point, most everybody, right? And that's just one other tool we're going to give to you guys. So you could set up, a task to send a postcard, a day 1 email, a day 5 email, a letter, another task, a day 10 email, a day 180 email. You get the idea. And it will remind you and prompt you to go through the process with each one of your records. And that part's not going to take us long once we get the drip email done. It's just going to be a continuation of our 3 different methods: tasks, appointments, and follow-up calls, and letters and whatnot. Everything balled up into one. The code's all there. We just have to tie it together. All right. Someone asked, can all of this stuff be done in a dialing campaign? So yes, you can create, that's the point, exactly. Good question. So you can create appointments, tasks, and follow-up calls right from with a dialing campaign. That's absolutely the case. Someone asked, can you create repetitive tasks in Mojo? Yes, we have the recurring tasks and follow-up calls. That's why I just answered that question about action plans. That's coming. Someone asked again, can I use a triple line dialer for follow-up calls? We don't do that. And Dave, I hope you understand why now. If you have that many. Yeah, so Brandon just came into my office. He's like, hey man, I answered all those. So Brandon, did you answer these so everybody could see them? Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize we could do that. I'm an old timer. So people want to know how they're going to get the webinar link, and it's going to auto send through GoToWebinar. So if you registered, it should auto send it. I think it's at the end of the day they send it out. Wow, a lot of good questions. All right. It looks like hopefully you guys saw all these questions as answered. But again, if you guys have any future questions or follow-up questions, my name is David England, David at Mojo Sells. Please don't spam me. It's risky that I put that out there, and I got a lot going on, just like you all do, and I do have to prioritize my day. But certainly, if it's questions about this, hit me up with it. I'd love to answer it. I like to get involved periodically with that kind of stuff. And again, action plans are going to be coming out. So it's funny. Someone just posted, Vicky. Thank you so much. Just put a smile on my face. She said basically, great class. There's so much I'm not using, and that's the point of these flash webinars, because most people that come on to Mojo, they're freaked out by calling people in general, and they put up blinders, and they build a scotoma basically to anything else Mojo can do. And that's, you only learn what you learn, right? So they'll log on to Mojo, they start power dialing, and they feel good. They get past the call reluctance, and they don't look around, and we get that. There's a lot of stuff people don't use inside of Mojo, and there's going to be a lot more that we come out with that, frankly, we have to do a better job of conveying its value. That's the truth of it. We're a small company up in New Hampshire, and it's hard for us to get everything we need to get done. So we feel these flash webinars are a good introduction. We're at 4:09. I see some questions coming in. I'm going to wrap up. Anybody have any other questions that haven't been answered? All right, everybody, thank you very much. Look for another one of these next week. And another thing I want to point out as you're leaving, my goal as captain of the ship here is to get back on schedule with weekly releases, followed by bi-weekly major releases. So little stuff, little nuancy stuff that we didn't catch that you guys who were kind of like the pilots of Mojo anyways, remind us about on the tech lines or in our feedback area. Those things we're trying to bang out in a certain order based on a time frame when they were submitted to us. And I'm happy to say we're doing it weekly basically at this point. And I think we've made about 95 improvements in the last 5 weeks. And again, we have some big things about to plop down on the plate here. So we are very excited about it. So our commitment to you is to keep improving everything, to try to do this flash webinar once a week. They're going to get somewhat repetitive, but that's okay. We've got thousands of clients, and we haven't had thousands of clients yet on each one of these. So it's something for everybody. Thank you very much, and have a great day.